My name is Ben and this is the English Labs video on 5 quotes from high ground that might mean a little bit more than what you thought the first time you saw them. I'm going to take a look at 5 separate quotes and talk about ways that I saw them in the first few times that I watched this film. Now, you might see them differently, and that is not just okay, that's to be celebrated. The idea that we all interpret and understand this film in a range of different ways is what this subject is really all about. But as I move through them, there might be a few things that come up and really help you there as well, and I hope that it certainly does that for you. Our first quote here, from Travis to Gutjuk. I'm not sure anyone gets to choose what kind of man they're going to be. Now, this is like so many other quotes in this film, on the surface, just a pretty seemingly innocuous thing to say. Well, I'm not sure anyone gets to choose what type of man they get to be. But of course, underneath that, we have this understanding of Travis and what he is bound by. Is he bound by a loyalty, to the crown, to those with whom he served in a war? Is he bound by, justice or a sense of his own conscience in what is the right thing to do in terms of his own morality? All of these things have a heavy impact upon Travis. And even though he may have beliefs about what he feels is right and wrong, his actions, sometimes betray that, and that everything that he wants to be, might not necessarily be possible. The reason I love this quote is that it gets us really thinking about Travis as a character and whether we feel sympathy for him, whether we don't, whether we feel that he could have acted differently, whether we feel that he was trapped, to act in the way that he did, and that, there wasn't a whole lot more that he could do. But of course, with that, we also have to think about Gutjuk as well, in that this quote also speaks to the power that the rest of the world can have upon us, and that despite what our best intentions might be, despite what we might want to be, despite what we might think is right, there are other factors at play here that might have a tremendous impact on who we get to be. There are some very dark themes in this film that I'm sure you'll be very well aware of, and Moran is a character that carries so many of those. And so many of the terrible attitudes of those who colonised Australia are shown through him and the things that he says. And so this next quote, I think, is just so emblematic of an attitude of white Australians, the dismissal of the Indigenous peoples, that it really gives an insight into this attitude and so on. And as it goes here, you know how civilization's built, son? Bad men. Bad men doing bad things, clearing the way for others to follow. Bad men like me and you. Whatever made you think you could change who you are? And so we have it fully exposed. This acknowledgement that Moran on some levels understands the evil of what he is doing, that Moran understands the injustice, the hypocrisy of him being so outraged at the murder of a white woman, whereas a massacre of the Indigenous peoples can just be so easily just swept away and so easily dismissed. Of course, with this as well, we have this idea of what motivates Moran, and that how he justifies his behaviour, in that he is saying to Travis, well, essentially, these actions and what we're doing right now, we have to do the bad things so that people later on can benefit from that. So it's a justification. He's explaining away his own behaviour, and in a way looking to be able to say, I'll be the bad guy so that others can reap rewards further on down the line. It's also quite chilling in what he says to Travis as well, in basically saying to him, this is the way that it is, and who on earth do you think you are to try and change it? When we think about, terrible things such as, racist attitudes and the way in which Indigenous peoples of countries, not just Australia, have been treated by those who colonised their lands, we need to look at the attitudes and the things that existed there, and the overall power of larger groups, and how individuals within that obviously made that up, but of course were so powerful, and how we can ask ourselves, individuals and what impact they might have been able to have upon these things happening. It is, as I mentioned, quite chilling when he says, what made you, think you could change who you are? And he's basically saying to Travis, you're a bad man, then that's who you are, and you may as well get on with it and suck it up and understand. Moran has quite a few of these sorts of lines. I'd really encourage you to take a look out for them, because we can start to use terms like I did before. It's quite emblematic of the overall attitude, or it really reveals the motivations behind those, white Australians who look to colonise the nation. Next, we have another Moran quote. They crossed a line, they killed a white woman. And in this moment, this is hypocrisy just laid bare. This idea that, for them to have killed a white woman means that, some line has been crossed, meaning that they have committed some terrible act. Now, of course, I'm not here to argue that that isn't a terrible act. A murder is a murder after all. But when they mention this, and that this is something that Moran can so easily make a judgment upon in saying this is a clear line that has been crossed, whilst he is able to trivialise or, dismiss, what has been done to Indigenous Australians at the same time, lays bare the hypocrisy and the blatant racism that fuels so much of his behaviour and of the people of the time. It is a way for us to be able to say, okay, these are the words that really underscore what drives these people and what drives so much of the action of this film. And that when it's laid bare like that, it's no longer just an implication and something that we can come to interpret and understand. It's put right there in front of us that a lot of what has driven these people to do the things that they do is based on an arrogance and a hypocrisy that runs deep throughout them. So for quotes 4 and 5, I'm going to piece them together, even though they come from two different parts of the film. The first is when Moran says to Claire, "It's not really your choice, is it?" And I can remember the very first time I watched this film, almost having a reaction to it, thinking, oh, the look on his face. The actor Jack Thompson does such a great job of really showing that the reason why we, really distrust and despise Moran when we watch this film, because he is really just laying bare to Claire that you have no power here whatsoever, and that you might have your opinion, but it is worth absolutely nothing. What's really interesting about this as well, of course, is that we have these power dynamics that are playing out, throughout the film, and the different points when different characters have the high ground. When we consider, though, what the status quo is amongst these communities and amongst these people, we have, these white men in Eddie and Moran and Travis and so on. And then, of course, we see their attitude towards the Indigenous people. But then where this quote shines a really interesting light on it is when we consider that, okay, Claire, as a woman out on this settlement, is treated in that way where she is shown to have very, very little power as well. It is an interesting dynamic. It shows more of this idea of a hierarchy, a sense of status, and a sense of those who have power and those who definitely do not. Why I've put these two quotes together is because the second one here, "You can't share a country, Claire," is a really short quote. It's said by Eddie as a way to, in his way, sort of explain to Claire, what's behind his actions. He has been able to put this forward. He's been able to make sense of this situation by saying, that it's us or them. That, if we don't act in the way that we are and, carry through with this violence and so on, that, it might go some other way, however it might be. That you can't share a country. It has to be one group or the other. And that therefore, as the, European and British settlers, they need to establish dominance here because a country can't be shared. The reason why I've put that with the last quote is that we can really start to think about why Johnson may have put these in the way that he has, and why it is that characters like Eddie and Moran, sometimes when they show themselves to be, the quite despicable characters that they are, it's when they are speaking to Claire as one of the few female characters that's involved here. And when we start to think that way, we can open ourselves up to really thinking about the decisions made by Johnson. Why does he have, a man of God like Braddock there? What does that help add to these ideas of the film? Why have someone like Claire there and the way that she is spoken to and the way that these power dynamics are, exposed to her in a way where it says, look, you wouldn't understand because you're not one of the ones in charge. And that, as was said before, nothing is really her choice. So just a really interesting thing for you to think about, and perhaps when you're, in subsequent viewings of the film, you can consider, okay, why is it that they include a character like Claire, and what further dimensions to some of these ideas about power, control, racism, sexism, all of these things that are going on throughout this film. What is it that Claire is able to help Stephen Johnson expose through her inclusion? So that is just a selection of 5 quotes. There are, of course, 500 more quotes that I think are going to be really helpful for you to understand in this film. If you think that there was a quote that we missed out on, please put it down there in the comments. I'd love to see what quotes you think are really exposing some really key ideas. If you've got any questions about high ground, be sure to put them down there in the comments as well. All of these quotes have been sourced from our quote bank, which is a part of our study guide that we have written. It is available to purchase on our website. You can take a look at that at the link that is in the description. Take a look at the rest of our channel to see some of the other videos that we've put together on high ground, and perhaps some other texts that you're studying during your VCE English journey. But until we see you next time, all the best with your study and good luck.